Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Katie and I'm very excited to film today's video because I've had so many requests from you guys saying you want me to talk about the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, so that's what I'm finally here to do today. I also do want to point out, if you're just stumbling across this channel because of this video, this is not a psychology themed channel. I generally make book reviews, but because I'm getting my master's in industrial organizational psychology right now, I just like to make these videos every now and then. So I'll have a card linked above as well as down below about my other videos in this series. So in terms of the structure of today's video, I'm going to go through exactly what the Myers-Briggs personality assessment is, what my 4 letters are that pop up when I take it, and then I will get into the cons and the pros. I'm sure most of you know what the Myers-Briggs is, but if you don't, it's a personality assessment based on the theories of Carl Jung. And the basis of what this personality assessment is saying is that our personalities are very orderly and consistent, and they don't tend to vary that much. So once you take the Myers-Briggs, there are going to be 4 letters that pop out, which represent 4 different categories. So the first category is your favorite world. I didn't realize that was the phrasing for extroversion versus introversion. I think that's kind of funny, but it's essentially whether you prefer your outer world, meaning you're an extrovert, or your own inner world, meaning you're more of an introvert. I think that's the one people are most familiar with, and then for most people, the last 3 are a little bit fuzzy, but the second one is information, whether you're sensing or intuition. So it's whether you focus on basic information or whether you prefer to make your own interpretations and add meaning. For the third, and this is the one where I feel like I could fit into both categories, so I always have a little bit of trouble with this, and that is decisions. So it's thinking or feeling, meaning do you like to make your assessments based off of logic and consistency, or do you think that the situation kind of depends more on people and special circumstances? The final one is structure, so judging or perceiving, meaning do you prefer to get things decided or do you prefer to stay open to new information and options? So I have taken this multiple times previously, and I don't know what happened with their website. I could have sworn that on the original Myers-Briggs site you used to be able to take it for free, but now you can't. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have sworn 5 years ago I took it for free. But previously, every single time I've taken it, I have received the assessment of INFJ. So for INFJs, I remember reading that only 1% of people score INFJ, so it's pretty rare, but it says that you're quietly caring, compassionate, pursues meaning, harmony, creative, idealistic, empathic helpers, inquisitive, enjoys ideas, language, writing, independent, and adaptable. So now I'm going to go ahead and get into the cons and then the pros. So in terms of cons, a lot of academic psychologists, and I see this online, I've heard it in a lot of my previous classes that I've taken, a lot of people in the field really view the Myers-Briggs as pseudoscience. I've heard a lot of people go so far as to say they think it's on par with like reading your horoscope and your astrological sign. Now, I wouldn't go that far, and I'll get into the pros as I said in a minute, but on the whole, from what I've been able to gather, the Myers-Briggs just is not very reliable, meaning that if you take it multiple times across the span of say 30 years, you're not going to receive the same results when the point of this assessment is to kind of prove that your personality is consistent. Now, I know people might comment and say, well, I've taken a number of times and for me it was the same, so that means it must be reliable. As I said, I've taken it multiple times and it was reliable for me, but that doesn't mean that on the whole it's reliable for everyone. And they've done enough research regarding the Myers-Briggs to show that in general, when people take it multiple times, that they don't receive the same results. Now, psychology has shown that our personality in general does remain fairly consistent throughout our lives, so that's showing that this isn't necessarily a very valid indicator of our personality. The other issue with the Myers-Briggs is that it's a binary classification system, meaning that say you're an ambivert, say you're right in between an introvert and an extrovert. If you're 52% extrovert, so say you're pretty much right in the middle, you're almost as much introverted as you are extroverted, it's going to spew out and tell you that you're E, you're an extrovert, and so you're going to walk away with your 4 letters with E at the front and be like, okay, I am an extrovert. So a lot of people feel that the Myers-Briggs just simplifies people's personalities too much. Now, you guys might say, well, a lot of the assessments you take online, it does show you that percentage, which I would agree with, so I think part of the issue might not be the assessment itself, but people being a little too lazy oftentimes to actually read into and to look at what their kind of ranking is within each of those categories. And I know a lot of you guys might say, well, when I described it, it described me perfectly, but let's be honest, a lot of times the results you get from this are almost always positive. And most people, when they read a positive assessment of their personality, you're gonna find a way to justify that description to yourself and fit it to your personality. So for example, if we look at the decision category, so are you thinking or feeling? Now, I've always got an F when I looked at this, which is feeling, meaning I look at the people and special circumstances. And when I look at that, I think that definitely makes sense, because when I make decisions, I definitely think it's dependent on the person and all the different factors going on and the special circumstances. circumstances. However, if it had told me, if I just have a lot of self-awareness right now, if it had told me the opposite, if it had told me that I'm more focused on logic and consistency, I would be like, yeah, that completely makes sense, because I am very analytical. I think I'm very consistent in my decision-making process. So if you kind of have that self-awareness looking at your responses, you can kind of see how no matter what your responses are, that you're gonna figure out a way to justify it to yourself and say, oh my god, that fits me to a T. Now, the only exception I would say for that is introvert or extrovert, but I also think that if you're an extreme introvert or an extreme extrovert, I do think the assessment is going to validly predict that. It's kind of those other three categories where I think a lot of people, no matter what, would read their results and say it describes them perfectly. Now, where I see the Myers-Briggs most often used, and you could say this is a pro or a con, and I'll get into the pros as I said in a second, you don't tend to see this used in academic psychology and psychological research. You see it much more so in the professional setting. Now, for someone like me who studies psychology, you can understand how that's a little bit troubling, because some companies are using a personality assessment that's not very valid, that's not very reliable, to make decisions on whether or not they should hire employees. Now, I do want to point out that there are super valid, reliable personality instruments and assessments out there. For example, there's the MMPI, there's the Big Five, which is personally my favorite. Now, that's the model, not the actual assessment, but that looks at categories such as extroversion, openness to experience, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. So with this assessment, it's going to show you where you fall within each of those categories. It's not just going to say, okay, you're E or you're an I. It's instead, for example, it's just going to tell you what your score is on the extroversion scale. Now we're going to get into the pros, and I do apologize the last few minutes were negative. I mean, I'm not going to apologize that I said any of it, because I'm not going to just lie and tell you guys fluffy stuff, but now let's get into the pros. So the main pro of the Myers-Briggs is that it's the most widely known personality instrument. So just at its core, it's really great that it actually gets people to start talking about their personalities. So although it doesn't necessarily work in the sense that it's actually giving you an accurate description of your personality, it works in the sense that it gets people to kind of sit down and talk about how they might be different. So say, for example, for your little group in school or for your work group at the office, you have everybody take it and then talk about it. I guarantee that a big percentage of the people in your school group or work group had not previously thought about how maybe they should treat working it with an introvert different than an extrovert, or just how people's personalities might be different. I know one of my friends at a company she interned at, they didn't force people to do this, it was just completely optional, but they sent people the Myers-Briggs and said, if you want to, you can take this, and then on your little whiteboard everybody has outside their cubes, you can go ahead and write down what your 4 letters are. Now, I know you might say, Katie, you just spent a really long time saying how that's not necessarily a valid personality instrument, so how would it be a remotely good thing to have something that's maybe not correct labeling someone outside of their cube? That is true. However, it gets people to have that mentality to not treat people how you want to be treated, treat people how they want to be treated. A lot of people think that you should treat people how you want to be treated, but for example, that would mean that, say I'm a super extrovert. I'm not, but let's just pretend I am. That would mean that when I have my coworker Sue, I'm gonna think, okay, she wants to be treated how I want to be treated. I want to have tons of meetings with this person and talk with them all the time. Whereas, say maybe Sue is a super introvert, but so it gets me to think, okay, I should treat her how she wants to be treated, not just how I would want to be treated by her. So although the Myers-Briggs is not very valid, it's not very reliable, I think if you recognize it simply for what it is and as a tool to get people to start talking about personality, then I do think it can do some good. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I will also say, because I know I'm going to get comments asking for links where people can take, say, the Myers-Briggs or the Big Five or the MMPI online, I couldn't find any that were free that I thought seemed very reputable. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, please let me know which Psych videos you guys would like to see in the future, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.